This is the moment the story flips. Just weeks ago, this prosecutor stood inside the federal system, armed with authority, power, and protection. Today, that protection is gone, and what replaced it is far more dangerous. As of this month, a prosecutor once tied to Donald Trump is no longer inside the Justice Department, and now faces something most government lawyers fear more than public criticism: formal legal scrutiny of their own conduct. If you look closely at what's happening behind the scenes, you'll notice something unusual. Judges aren't defending her. Institutions aren't stepping in. And former allies have gone quiet. This isn't just about losing a job. This is about whether actions taken while holding power crossed legal and ethical lines, and whether those actions now come back with consequences. Because when a prosecutor is removed, questions follow. When courts raise concerns, records get examined. And when bar regulators start paying attention, careers don't just end, they can unravel. In this story, we're going to break down how a prosecutor rose too fast, why her removal didn't end the problem, and how the legal system may now turn inward. This isn't politics anymore. This is accountability. And it's just beginning. Before the headlines, before the removal, before the legal trouble, this prosecutor did not enter the system as a household name. There was no long public record of major cases or landmark wins. Instead, her rise happened quietly, through appointments, internal promotions, and trust placed by people higher up the chain. At the time, the Justice Department was under intense political pressure. Loyalty mattered, speed mattered, and experience sometimes took a back seat to alignment. She was brought into sensitive legal work during a chaotic period when cases connected to Donald Trump were attracting non-stop attention. Every filing was scrutinized. Every courtroom appearance carried political weight. Mistakes were not just mistakes. They became signals. From the outside, everything looked normal. She carried the title. She spoke for the government. She stood before judges as a federal prosecutor. But behind that image, concerns were already forming. Colleagues questioned whether she had been placed into a role she wasn't ready for. Judges began asking sharper questions. Courtrooms became less forgiving. Small procedural issues started to matter a lot. And here's the key point. In the legal world, authority only exists as long as courts respect it. Once that respect starts to crack, everything else becomes fragile. Her appointment was meant to strengthen the government's position. Instead, it placed her at the center of growing tension between politics, procedure, and the strict rules that govern prosecutors. By the time the removal happened, the problem was no longer just political optics. It was structural. And removal didn't erase what came before. It exposed it. The real trouble didn't begin when she was removed. It began before that, inside federal courtrooms, in moments most people never see. During multiple hearings, judges started doing something rare. They didn't just disagree with arguments. They questioned the legitimacy of how the prosecution was operating. Not loudly, not dramatically, but clearly enough to matter. At first, it looked like routine pushback. Judges ask tough questions all the time. But this was different. The tone changed. The patience shortened. And written opinions began to reflect deeper concerns. Then the warnings became public. One judge questioned whether the prosecutor had the legal authority to be in that role at all. Another raised issues about how representations were made to the court. A third focused on whether constitutional boundaries were crossed during key stages of the case. Each issue alone would be serious. Together, they formed a pattern. And while those courtroom concerns were unfolding, something else was happening at the same time. While judges were expressing doubt, internal pressure inside the Justice Department was building. While filings were being challenged, supervisors were quietly reassessing risk. While the public focused on politics, the legal system focused on rules. This is the part people miss. Courts don't care about headlines. They care about process. When process breaks, everything breaks. Eventually, the situation reached a point where the Justice Department made a move. The prosecutor was removed from her position. No long explanation, no dramatic press conference, just a quiet exit. But removal didn't close the case. It opened a new one. Because once she was out, outside organizations stepped in. Complaints were filed. Records were reviewed. Judges' statements were cited line by line. The question shifted from, should she still be in this role, to, should her conduct be investigated? That shift is critical. An internal removal is damage control. An external investigation is accountability. And here's where it escalated further. Legal ethics regulators, the same bodies that control whether a lawyer can practice at all, began receiving formal complaints. These aren't political groups. These are professional regulators. They deal in facts, transcripts, and rules. If they determine that a prosecutor acted outside ethical or legal boundaries, the consequences don't end with embarrassment. They include sanctions, suspensions, even loss of license. Pause. At this stage, the story stops being about Trump or politics or headlines. It becomes about whether someone entrusted with the power of the state followed the rules that make that power legitimate. And once that question is asked officially, there is no easy exit. What the public sees is removal. What happens behind closed doors is far more serious. After the prosecutor left her position, the legal system didn't move loudly. It moved quietly. That's how accountability actually works. Not through press conferences, but through letters, filings, and internal reviews. Formal complaints were sent to legal ethics authorities. These weren't vague accusations or social media noise. They were detailed submissions pointing to courtroom transcripts, judicial remarks, and specific actions taken while she held power. Inside these institutions, the process is slow but unforgiving. Committees review whether a lawyer followed professional rules. Investigators compare statements made in court with the actual authority granted. Judges' written opinions are treated as evidence, not commentary. And here's what makes this situation different. Normally, government lawyers are shielded while they're still in office. Regulators often hesitate. Jurisdiction becomes complicated. Responsibility gets blurred. That shield is gone now. With her no longer inside the Justice Department, there is no institutional barrier, no employer to defer to, no claim that oversight would interfere with ongoing government work. That changes everything. Behind the scenes, regulators are now free to ask direct questions. Was the appointment valid? Were representations to the court accurate? Did actions taken meet ethical and constitutional standards? At the same time, former colleagues aren't speaking publicly. There are no strong defenses being offered, no coordinated response. That silence matters. In the legal world, silence often signals risk, because defending a colleague means attaching your own credibility to their actions. And when judges have already raised red flags, many choose distance instead. This is the stage where careers quietly collapse, not in public, but in private files and internal decisions that surface months later as final outcomes. By the time the public hears a conclusion, the real decisions have already been made. And once ethics regulators move forward, there is no political spin that can stop the process. So why did this happen? The answer isn't emotion or politics. It's incentives. The Justice Department's first goal is not loyalty to individuals. It's protection of the institution. When judges begin questioning authority, legality, and constitutional boundaries, the risk stops being personal and becomes systemic. At that point, removing one prosecutor is easier than defending a compromised process. Once she became a liability, the calculation was simple. Distance the department, contain the fallout, let external regulators handle the rest. This is how power shifts quietly. While she once spoke for the government, she now stands alone. She no longer represents the state. She answers to professional rules like every other lawyer, without insulation. There's also a broader message being sent. Prosecutors are given extraordinary power. They are trusted to act fairly, accurately, and within strict limits. When courts signal that trust may have been broken, the system responds fast. Not to punish politics, but to preserve legitimacy. In other words, this isn't about removing one person. It's about signaling to everyone else that authority is conditional. And when that condition is questioned, the system does not hesitate to protect itself. What's happening here doesn't stop with one prosecutor. Inside legal and political circles, this case is being watched closely. Not because of the person involved, but because of what it signals. When a prosecutor is removed and then faces professional scrutiny, it sends a warning through the entire system. Lawyers who operate near political power understand the risk immediately. Authority can vanish overnight. Protection can evaporate just as fast. The domino effect is real. If regulators decide rules were broken, future prosecutors will be more cautious. Supervisors will tighten oversight. Judges will become less patient. Every representation in court will be examined more closely. And there's another consequence people don't talk about: isolation. Once scrutiny begins, allies step back. Former colleagues stop calling. Public defenders disappear. Silence replaces support. That isolation isn't accidental. It's self-preservation. At the same time, institutions reposition. They distance themselves. They prepare statements. They make sure the record shows compliance, not loyalty. This is how accountability reshapes behavior, not through spectacle, through fear of precedent. Because once one line is crossed and punished, everyone else redraws their boundaries. And that may be the most lasting impact of this case. In the legal world, a license is everything. It's not just permission to work, it's credibility, authority, and trust, all wrapped into one fragile privilege. This story isn't about a prosecutor who lost a job. It's about what happens after the protection disappears. Courts have spoken. Regulators are watching. Institutions have stepped back. Whatever the outcome, one thing is already clear: power without accountability never lasts. And when the system decides to protect itself, no title is strong enough to stop it. This case isn't over. It's entering its final phase. Watch closely.